funded the company a couple, 3 years ago, right near the time of the pandemic. The investment thesis was mainly a single asset company doing abuse-deterrent oral ketamine treat severe depression. Most of you probably know what ketamine is. It's an agent with abuse potential. So we'll walk through that in the presentation. But we just wanted to say right now, we're doing kind of two-step financing. So we have an EIS qualifying round that's open at the moment. We're filling that up with our existing investors who offer support for key interim clinical milestones. Overall, we're seeking about $10 million to fund phase 2 studies over the next couple of years. So we aim to achieve clinical proof of concept, so validate this formulation is effective in severe depression disorders, start to manufacture it closer to commercial scale. And we're also going to start to do digital technologies that show how we can further ensure patient safety inside a clinical care context. Overall, the picture is we think we're as few as 4 years before market approval after we achieve this milestone. All in all, we think we do that with a partner. So this is kind of the investment before what we predict is a potential exit. Again, the background of ketamine, most of you know it, but it's been discovered over 50 years ago. It was initially discovered as a high dose, let's say IV anesthetic, so put people to sleep before surgery, other ways of sedating people. Because of those effects, the known neurochemistry of ketamine, it became a drug of abuse. It was scheduled as a Class B agent in the UK. And so the whole idea of the company is to get a presentation of ketamine that's safe, but limits that potential for abuse. Around the time that it became a scheduled drug, psychiatrists and other researchers found utility for it at lower doses in patients with severe depression. So about 5 times lower than the anesthetic dose, you can get these quite profound effects in depressed patients. That led Janssen, among others. Other people have been working on this to try and find a safe form or a suitable form of ketamine to treat depression. So Janssen, about 5 years ago, got a nasal spray form of this one enantiomer, so S-ketamine, was approved for use in treatment-resistant patients. It's a fairly major market. That's essentially what we're kind of competing with, but trying to make an oral formulation that's suitable. You can imagine, because you're talking about making something easier to use in an oral kind of daily form, that creates a specter of abuse. We just really want to talk about where the company is positioned overall in context. We all know mental health, severe depression specifically, has high unmet need. Against that, we have this potential for abuse. So we're talking about millions of patients in need, hundreds of thousands of patients in severe need that go to hospital. In the UK, especially, very few of those patients get IV ketamine right now. It's a highly inconvenient way to get a severe mental treatment care. Likewise, drug abuse is substantial. And so we're never, as a company, talking about the limitation of that, except through our technology. This is a public health threat like any other. And so we're, a responsible developer in that context. And, we think that while ketamine diversion is relatively low risk in the bigger context, we're, ensuring that we're going to get a product on the market that's safe for the patients and the community that they live in. How do we go about doing that? One thing is to talk to the docs who use this stuff every day. So leading docs in Boston. Over in London, we've talked to them for years. They have ketamine in their clinics. They've treated severe depressed patients for years. And they kind of validated this concept that there is a type of pill that, if developed safely, brought to market in a responsible way, is going to open up new care options for these patients that don't have them right now. We've been funded by the Wellcome Trust before. The investigators down at King's have received grants from the MRC, Research Council. So, most major players and the people who kind of think about the future of mental care see a place for an oral ketamine in the market for their patients. And again, this is sort of the overall positioning of the company. The intent is to make a safety-first prescription treatment option that addresses this gap in mental care. How do we do that? Overall, the use of funds is going from our prior phase 1 studies that we achieved with our last seed financing round, where we showed safe doses of this oral capsule pill in phase 1 studies. And then also King's and compassionate use studies have been treating on a small pilot basis patients who have severe depression with these prototype capsules. They see early signs of efficacy and safety in a home setting. So we have patients in the Greater London area who've been taking the agent for months, up to years, and getting relief with suitable safety at home. We believe that substantially de-risks the upcoming phase 2 trials. But the overall deliverable of the phase 2 trials is that first portrait of an abuse-deterrent capsule that's safe and effective, potentially indicated for home use. Minimally, it's an agent that competes with S-ketamine and IV ketamine in clinical settings. Again, we need to go through commercial drug manufacture, and we want to start to explore where digital technologies can further improve patient safety. The overall picture is, we believe, if successful in these next milestones, you do have a product that's eligible for market entry within 5 years. So the first oral ketamine suitable for depressed patients. The overall technology of the company is a key foundational patent. So the overall profile that we're looking at is it's a capsule form. If you ever crack it open, try and play around with the powder in it, it forms a non-wettable gel. So IV drug users can't put it into IV solutions, and it can't be insufflated or snorted through the nose. That's the key patent. So that's where we believe there's a safety barrier to ensure safety in community settings that limits that potential for diversion. When presented to patients for depression, we probably have about 8 of those capsules in a small packet. So this blister pack is a monthly supply. There's some risk to personal safety with the patient who has a presentation of oral capsules, but the only way they can do it is by essentially intentionally dosing too much, which again, for these patients in these clinical care contexts, we think can be potentially suitably safe, subject to regulatory review. The next layer, and we're just in the early stages of this, but we think, again, digital technologies are really coming on here and can further ensure clinical safety. So the current care pathway, a patient reports to clinic, goes through an induction phase. For several weeks, they go through a kind of crossover phase, and then they transition where they're getting ketamine IV in clinic on a kind of weekly or semi-monthly basis. We think that there's a care pathway with digital technology where oral dosing can be supervised in the first 3 weeks of this induction course. As they cross over, and this happens now with Kings in their clinical care, our patients, their patients have been dosed on oral ketamine in the subsequent weeks of their therapy safely at home. We want the phase 2 trials to show that, to demonstrate that for a regulatory review of clinical safety in clinic and at home. In that overall context, we think there's a regulatory path to approve the agent in several different potential mental health indications. So the lead indication, this gets a little bit to the product positioning, is in treatment-resistant unipolar depression. So these are patients with depressive episodes. In their most recent episode, they failed 2 prior lines of therapy, and they're in need of essentially like a salvage therapy to get that depression relief. That's been validated. That's where IV ketamine is indicated now, and where Janssen's nasal spray is indicated now. There are potential additional indications where the product will work. We're going to fund a trial in bipolar depression, and that's potentially going to be backed by Wellcome, who think it's a very high unmet medical need. Likewise, as I mentioned, Kings has been awarded a pretty interesting grant to pilot the medicine in patients with severe anorexia. So through one way or another, we have a few different shots on goal in phase 2 to validate what we think is already potentially a safe credentialed dose or dose plan for patients as they move to market. And that's pretty much it as far as overall, milestones. We're thinking about commercial manufacture, commercial presentation towards market, validating that these pivotal studies, which we think probably will be taken on by a partner, will get the product onto market, but we'll de-risk that substantially in this next phase. And then likewise, that some of this phase 2 data will show this portrait of a safe agent that with some digital technology we believe can be suitable for home use. The market positioning, we believe, addresses again that key gap and is pretty substantial. So the deficiencies, the inconvenience of IV ketamine, the difficulty of getting nasal ketamine in clinic, the cost of it make a market opportunity, but also a care opportunity for patients. So we know there are several hundred thousands of patients a year in many countries who are potentially eligible for treatment. The initial peak sales of S-ketamine were estimated in several billions of pounds and are now about 5 or 6 billion a year. That's kind of the market setting for us. It's a small team, but we're growing and looking to expand our clinical trials, the leadership over in Boston and here in the UK through Kings. So that's us.